Hey, Double Springs family. I'm back here with you, continuing our When God Brings a Storm series. Today we're going to be looking at the book of Job. We looked at the book of Paul. We talked about how God brought the figurative storm. There's a literal blindness as well attached to that figurative storm. So we talked about how Paul was a non-believer into a believer. So now we're going to talk about what happens when God brings a storm to a faithful follower. And so Job is a massive book, 42 chapters. So we're not going to be able to cover it all in one video. I aim to do it in 3, maybe 4. Just depends. There's a lot of information. It's a great book. It's a very deep book. It is a very difficult book. So what we're going to do today is I'm just going to give a brief synopsis, as brief as I can be, of the story of Job. And then we will break it into parts and talk about it. So we'll talk about the first part today. And the first part we'll talk about is really just, what happens. So today will be more of a summary of the story with a brief explanation. And then the rest of the videos pertaining to Job will be will be more in depth. We'll talk more about how they apply to us. So, Book of Job starts out, God is hanging out with his angels, and Satan comes along. God says, "Where you been, Satan?" Satan's like, "I've been roaming the earth." And he says, "Well, have you tried my boy Job?" So, what happens is he says, "You can do anything, but you just cannot touch Job. You can take anything from him, but you cannot touch Job or kill Job." So Satan takes that to heart, and he kills Job, all of Job's children. He takes all of Job. He has outsiders take all of Job's livestock, all of his wealth. During this time, it wasn't really about money. There wasn't really gold coins or paper. It was all about the livestock. And the crops. And the fire burned up the crops. The livestock were stolen. His kids were killed when they were all in this house celebrating, and the house collapsed on them. And so they take everything away. It's just Job and his wife. And so Satan comes back. And, God and his angels are hanging out, and he says, "What have you been doing?" Satan says, "I've been roaming the earth." And he says, "What about my boy Job?" And what I forgot to mention is, in this conversation between God and Satan, Satan says, "Well, of course, Job. God is saying that Job is the most faithful follower he has on earth." And he says that Job is his number one man, and so he kind of puts Job as his number one man in front of Satan. And Satan says, "Well, of course that he worships you and stays faithful to you because you give him everything." So God allowed Satan to take everything away from him, and Job is still worshiping God even though he lost everything. So then Satan comes back, and God says, "Well, you know what?" Satan says, he's still worshiping you because nothing happened to him. He says, "Okay, well, you can hurt him, but you can't kill him." So then he puts these bowls on Job. And so now Job is in physical pain. And Job, it says he puts on sackcloth and rips his clothes, and it says, "Naked from the womb I came, naked I'll go." So Job this is just how he mourned. You got basically, think of a potato sack, and he put this potato sack on, and he's in this time of mourning, and he's struggling because he's lost everything, and now he's in physical pain. So then we get quite a few chapters of this conversations between Job and his 3 friends. We have Zophar, we have Bildad, and we have Eliphaz. So he has all of these. We get many chapters of this in-depth conversation with his friends. His friends come and they sit silent. His friends come and sit silent with him for 7 days. None of them say a word. And then then Job pretty much lays out his heart, how he's feeling towards God, looking for advice, looking for insight from his friends, and his friends are trying to help him and respond to him. So then, Job gets angry at them. He's saying that they don't understand his struggles. They're not helpful. They're not helping him at all. So then we have another guy named Elihu who comes and then talks to Job. And kind of the same thing. Job's like, you're not helpful. It's not helping. So then Job talks to the man himself. Talks to the Lord. He talks to God. And God is talking to Job. And Job this whole time has just been like, I've been faithful. I've done nothing wrong. I don't understand why this is happening. But he never curses God. He continues to worship God. He just is trying to get an explanation from God. He's trying to get an understanding that Job feels like he did something wrong. And his friends keep telling him, you didn't do anything wrong. And so he's trying to figure out what's happening. He's trying to figure out, why is this happening? So he talks to God himself. And God basically says, I created the earth. I made you from nothing. I've made everything that's in existence. So how are you going to question me? So, we get this idea. We understand that he's mad at his friends and says his friends did a terrible job at helping him. But Job gets remarried, has kids, and becomes very wealthy again. And it's, in this story, Satan's defeated because Job stayed faithful to God. Satan believed that if he did all this to Job, that Job would curse God. We also know that at one point in this story, Job's wife tells him to curse God. So now that we talked about all that, that's a lot. This is a really interesting story, and it could be a hard story to read. It could be a confusing story. Why is Satan talking to God? Why are they hanging out? Why is God going to let someone who's faithful to him, why is he letting Satan do things to him? Why is he letting Satan take people away from him? And so that's just really interesting. But, what I want to talk about up to the point he talks with his friends. So, we have this idea that God and angels are speaking and Satan comes up and, talks to them. But, one thing I want to point out is what Satan says when God says, what have you been doing? He says, where have you come from? And Satan answered the Lord. This is verse 6 of chapter 1 of Job. And Satan answered the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. So we have this idea that Satan, at least on this time, and many Christians believe he is continually doing that, he is roaming the earth. He is causing deceit. He's causing pride. He's causing all of these sins. Oh, sorry about that. And he's causing all of these things to happen to people on earth, and he's causing all of these troubles and these sins to divide people and that sort of thing. And so this kind of comes as why did God tell Satan about Job and have Job do this? I don't know if I have the perfect answer for you. I don't know if I have the exact purpose in this situation, but one thing is God saying, Satan doesn't believe that anyone's faithful just to stay faithful. He thinks that they're faithful because God gives them things. So he uses Job as a point of, there are faithful followers who will love me and who will follow me even when they lose everything. One encouraging thing could be is that God doesn't do this to him personally. Satan does. So we know that, while God didn't technically bring the storm, he allowed the storm to happen. And, he allowed this because he knew that Job would stay faithful. He knew Job would not curse him and not blame him. Job just was trying to understand. And you can see, there's many, many chapters of him talking with his friends and Elihu and God himself. And he's struggling. He is, as would we if we lost every family member we had except for one. If we lost everything we owned, it would take a lot for us to overcome that, to recover. So that's kind of that's just the first few chapters. That's just the first couple chapters, chapter 1 and 2. And like I said, Job's wife tells him just to curse God. She's like, I know you're upset. Just curse him. I mean, just, this is it's in chapter 2. She says, his wife said to him, this is verse 9, are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die. He replied, you are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. All right, so what the beautiful thing about here, and this is where we'll end this video, is that Job never sinned. But what's encouraging is in Job didn't accept it with joy. Job was grieving. Job was upset. Job didn't understand why this was happening to him. Why did God allow this storm, this figurative storm to happen to him? And the beautiful thing is Job stayed faithful and has as an example of faith for us. That is an example of you can have faith, but you can still grieve. You can still question God. You can still wonder. You can still be confused why things happen to you or things happen to the people you love. And so that's what we get from these first couple of chapters. So like I said, that's where we'll close today. The next video we'll do, we will talk about Job's conversation with his friends and Elihu. And we'll see how far we get. Like I said, Job's conversation with his friends lasts 24 chapters. That's a lot. Obviously, we're not going to detail every chapter, but this is an interesting story. It's a difficult story to read, and if we put ourselves in Job's shoes, we can imagine just the pain and struggle that he goes through. So stay tuned as we continue to walk through this and understand why God allowed this to happen to Job. All right. See ya.